So we're going to talk about three things that every dispatcher basically needs to know. So if you see, I have a map like panned out from here. Okay, so this is if you're doing into Canada, this is what makes sense. You go via Canada. You can go through this as well, like Highway 11, and this is showing you through Highway 17. But usually in the winters, this is more dangerous route for any driver to take. I mean, all routes are difficult in the winter. No changes. So three things I'm gonna come on to that I wanted to let you know. So the first one being loaded miles. So what are loaded miles? Anything that a truck travels with while the truck is loaded. So the loaded miles make you money. Okay, and then second thing comes deadhead. Deadhead means, so let's say, for example, I'm giving you a hypothetical example. Let's say Toronto to Winnipeg. Okay, let's say somewhere before Winnipeg. Here makes up to 1,000 miles. So now you have to go 1,000 miles over here. You have to deliver, okay? And then you deliver. So that means if you're doing 2.5 miles, $2.5 per mile, you're going to be getting approximately 2,500 bucks. This is hypothetical example. I'm giving it to you. So you deliver this load here, and then from here it is like about approximately 150 miles to the nearest Flying J in Winnipeg. You will definitely get a load out of Winnipeg. So you're not gonna get something out of here. You're not gonna get something out of here. It is luck by chance if you get something out of here, but the main thing, you can get something out of Winnipeg. And then basically you when you travel that 150 mile that place to Winnipeg, you're repositioning your truck for your next pickup. Okay, so that means that is deadhead. Okay, so you're not getting paid for those miles. So now, once you reposition your truck, now you have, if you calculate that basic calculation, like 1,150 miles, and then your basically net or gross thing comes down to $2.17 per mile. So you see the difference, 2.50 per mile and 2.17 per mile. So that's your deadhead calculation. Okay, so always make sure you're moving the truck and calculating revenue while it's loaded, not to you're not calculating the mileage while you have to reposition it. You have to make sure you get the nearest stop off or nearest re pickup done, and just to maximize your carrier's efficiency. Okay, you got to see, how is my carrier benefiting? Will this move benefit my carrier? Okay, what truck and what equipment, like I said, like, is that, let's say in Winnipeg you have a reefer load coming back to Toronto, and now you have a dry van sitting with you. So what do? You start looking for, a switch. Let's say, so you have some of your other driver who can give that guy a reefer, basically get him empty, give him that layover, and get this guy rolling because he was there a day before. So you'll basically get your hands on, once you get into it, you get a hang of it, you'll know what I'm talking about. And then, like, RPM will be your rate per mile. You're gonna come across all these scenarios much often in your dispatching life. So this was the example that I wanted to give you. And then moving on, like, if you say 500, let's say second example. Okay, I'm gonna give it to you. 500 loaded miles, that same load, 500 loaded miles, it takes 2 days to deliver. So very different from a 5 mile load that can be basically picked up in the same day, delivered the same evening, whatever, next morning, early as possible. But 2 days, that's being inefficient. Your driver has to sit there. You have to calculate, like, you paying the driver a layover, two layovers, and then you delivering it. That is adding to your cost. Plus, every trucking company has, it's not just your money that the company has to pay. The company has to pay for the truck. The company has to pay for the insurance, permits, and transponders for the tolls and everything. And there's much more things, mechanics, and you know diesel. So it's all like a cycle of money, which is basically moving that whole trucking company. But you have to make sure that you're giving him an actual profit, not just that trucking company can just go by, breaking even. But to make profits in trucking, you gotta calculate all your moves properly, and then you gotta make sure that they're efficient and in the best interest of your carrier that you're supporting or working with. And to close off, I mean, basically your job is to help the carrier make better freight decisions. And then, let's say if you help him make better freight decisions, that definitely brings this guy's efficiency on top, and then he can, make sure that he rewards you. So I mean, I'm just giving you a mapped out example. And then, once you see these states that, once you zoom out, and then you basically see these states here, very easy to learn. And then these highways, I suggest you guys master from Toronto to Vancouver, all these highways or all these states, cities, okay? And then over here, West Coast, you gotta master all these places here down till San Diego. Lots of auto parts being delivered in this area. Lots of reefer loads coming out of Arizona because farming, blueberries and stuff. And then auto parts coming from Mexico going into San Diego and then coming to Toronto on, IT bonds. We're gonna get into it. In IT bond is a in transit bond, so that means they basically bring the machinery here across the border. It gets into a bond and then, comes to Toronto. You might have heard the word, is the carrier bonded, like non-bonded? So this is what is, if you're not bonded, basically you cannot haul that. So you have to be basically certified and to haul different stuff. And then you ask yourself, what does this move do to the truck's next position? That's how you handle, being efficient. And then that's where dispatching becomes strategic. So I want you all to, think strategically. And once you start thinking like that, there'll be, less dropout rates for any dispatcher. Throughout my career, like I was 6 years or 7 years into like a bigger company while dispatching, and then 3 or 4 years I was in a small company. So, the best thing I can, tell you that, 70 to 75% of dispatchers that I trained while being on my job, they basically, resigned because of the pressure, because of the dream being sold to them is like, pick up a laptop, work from anywhere, work from home. Dispatching is not like that. Dispatching is basically, it's all, you're multitasking, you got to be proactive in whatever decisions you're making because it's a big machine, big trailer, and a driver. It's his job. He's making money off of, the miles you're going to give him. If you're not going to give him enough miles, he's going to just change his dispatch or change his company. So see you in the next video. Thank you for watching.